The background and context that I'm going to cover is the regulatory framework. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to give you a flavour of the way that we're going to be structuring the submission that we present to Ofgem. As part of the overall business plan that we have to submit to them, there are 3 high-level elements. First of all, we've got to describe the service that we're going to be providing. As part of that, it will be looking at what improvements we're going to propose, what enhancements to service we're going to give, and then ultimately any new services that we're going to introduce. Ofgem have got a general term for that, which they're calling the consumer value proposition. So as part of that, we're going to have to reveal the kind of things that are of value to consumers and include that in our plans. In terms of investment on the network, we'll have to describe the activity volumes that we're going to do, so the length of line that we're going to replace, the number of transformers we'll be uprating. So we have to describe the amount and the volume of that kind of work and the type of work that we'll deliver. But underpinning all of that will be an amount of expenditure. And ultimately, Ofgem will be judging how much of that expenditure they will allow us. So it's a high-level requirement. That's the kind of thing that we'll be including in the business plan. But in terms of today's session, what we're looking at predominantly is that service element, the top one that I had. Ofgem have predefined 3 categories of outcome. And these are common across all the sectors. So gas distribution, transmission, and ourselves all have these 3 high-level categories of outcome. The first one looks at meeting the needs of consumers and network users. So this is related to the service quality and dealing with and helping out vulnerable customers. The middle one is more about the nuts and bolts, making sure that the network is safe, reliable and resilient. And thirdly, there's an area that has to look at the environment. So this is the environmental impact of our activities, but also how we are facilitating the transition to a net zero future. So they're the 3 high-level outcomes that we'll be looking at aligning all of your input into. Another layer of the framework is that there are different ways that Ofgem will regulate us. Again, 3 different categories here. You've got things called licence obligations, focusing on the word obligation. These are the things that we must do. They'll set minimum standards, and if we don't meet those minimum standards, there's a risk that we could then face some form of enforcement action from Ofgem. The second category is an incentive, an output delivery incentive. And with an incentive, they're either financial incentives, where we can earn a reward or suffer a penalty for the level of performance we provide, or they could be reputational, where they compare us against different companies' performance. And the third kind, a deliverable, this relates more to the work programmes that we propose. If we don't deliver those work programmes, Ofgem is introducing a mechanism that they can claw back some of the allowances that they've provided us if we don't actually complete those work programmes. So those are the sort of 3 types of measure and the way that Ofgem will regulate us. And we've split the screen into a purple zone and a green zone. The purple zone represents common outputs that the whole industry will be subject to. And the way that we're getting to work to define some of these is through working groups that are happening now with Ofgem, and they'll keep running all the way through this year as they develop their methodology for the next price control. But below that, we have the opportunity of specifying our own bespoke incentives, our own bespoke deliverables. So some of the output that you give us could factor into those bespoke outputs. So, as Alex said, the purpose of today is for you to review the kind of priorities that customers have told us about before. You can add to those, you can disagree with them. It's an open table discussion. But as part of that discussion, what we would like you to start thinking about are the things that you want us to deliver. And it could be that you want us to address something, to maintain a focus on something, to work with a body, those kind of things. So that's the kind of feedback that we want to get from you. What we will then do is compile all of that, add to it any regulatory driven activities that we have to fulfill, and we will allocate them into that framework that I've just talked about, and it will look something like this. This is what we're anticipating it might look like. So you'll have the 3 areas of outcome. Within each one of those areas, you will have license obligations, incentives, deliverables. Some may be common across the industry, some could be bespoke, specified by ourselves. There may be other commitments that arise from our discussions and your input that means that we then have to specify wider commitments outside of that framework. So we want to capture those as well. But underpinning all of that is something that we've talked about, and we talked about last year when we came around, is something called the social contract. It'll describe the way we go about our business, so looking at our corporate governance, how we engage with people, what our environmental performance is, and those kind of things. So that's the kind of framework that we're hoping to end up with. So that just gives you a flavour of where this will go. Very soon, after we have a bit of an icebreaker discussion, we'll get into some of the actual detail and when we have more detailed discussions around the tables. But for the next 10 minutes or so, 10 minutes, we will have a discussion around the table just so you can introduce yourselves and put forward some of your high-level requirements in the stage.
As quiet as possible, because it is all about phoning the floor out to you guys and no suggestions, silly suggestions.